This is Entrepreneurs Get Visible, the podcast for people who want more impact, influence, and income. I'm Anna Parker-Naples, and I'll be sharing with you proven methods from leading entrepreneurs that help you get visible as an authority in your field. Because anything's possible when you get visible. In today's episode of Entrepreneurs Get Visible, I'm talking about the trickle-down effect in terms of your revenue when you start podcasting and do it effectively. So before I go on today, I want you to know that right now, as of 9 o'clock last night, the doors to the podcast membership are now open. So if you want to find out more about that, go to thepodcastmembership.com/join, and all the details are there for you to come in and learn how to launch, grow, monetize your podcast, and then learn how to be a really great guest, because there is an art and a skill to it if you want it to be effective for your business. So today, let's talk about the trickle-down revenue. So what I mean by this is that there are many ways to monetize a podcast that are beyond the obvious sponsorship deals. Sponsorship deals can be really lucrative, but that's not always the best way to go for people. And in fact, so far on this show, it has been a deliberate strategy of mine not to use sponsors. Doesn't mean I won't do it in the future, but right now, that's not my preferred method. The trickle-down revenue is all about the fact that if you get your show launch right, if you get the concept of your show right, if you've got the right keywords, the right descriptions, the right title, the right artwork, and more importantly, the right consistent quality content that speaks to the problems and the solutions that your ideal listener, your perfect listener, is wanting to hear to fix something in their life, to whether it's relationship, whether it's mental health, whether it is a hobby that they want help and support with, whether it is something to do with their business that they want, maybe it's their financials or their, whatever it is. If you're answering those questions, people start to see you as the go-to person, as the person who can help them. And if you use your podcast through every single episode that you put out there, if you think about it strategically and think about how can I bring people into my funnel? So if you think about your podcast being the top of that funnel, and the next thing you're going to do is you're going to offer a freebie, a lead magnet. And very often these are attached to people's blogs or to their social media. But when people listen to a podcast, they are 76% more likely to do what you ask them to do with intent to purchase or get hold of the thing you recommend than in any other medium. So if you are constantly writing blogs and they're not getting any traction and it's not really helping your list, a podcast might be the answer. So if people come into that funnel, they are then in your world. They are then in your email sequence. It's not just random whether they see your posts on social media or not. And yes, you might end up in their spam box or their junk mail, but it might be that what you title your email with is exactly what they need to hear that gets them to open that email. So it becomes a much easier way to sell to people, and you warm them up, you can nurture them. So not only can you nurture them through the valuable content you're putting in your podcast, not only can they have that really intimate feeling that they're getting to know a little bit about you, through listening to your content, your current episodes, the entire back catalogue of episodes of valuable content for them, but you can now speak to them in their email list. And we all know how many times a day we check those because we've got our mobile phones with us all the time. We're pretty much attached to them these days. So it's about that. So once your people are in your email list and they're listening to your podcast, you have more ways to warm them up and sell to them if that's what you want to do. The other thing then is once you've got them in that list, you can bring them into a low-paying product, so a low-value product, or high value but low cost, should I say, and they become a paying customer. And once you've got a paying customer, it's much easier to then bring them down to this top of this funnel so that if you're an expert, for example, you might well have a low-cost membership. Then you might have a higher paid online course. Maybe you've got a high-ticket group program, and then maybe you've got one-to-one work, and then maybe you want to start a mastermind. Well, that's your funnel. You go from your free content all the way down to your absolute premium service. And a podcast allows you to position that warm and nurture. The other thing that happens with podcasts, and lots of people say to me, well, how can you really make money with podcasts? Well, I've just talked to you about the trickle-down revenue. But there's a couple of other things I want to mention here. So I was a pretty well-established speaker anyway. I'd been on multiple stages around the UK and the US before I started my first podcast. However, I wasn't monetizing it. And I felt that I had to kind of go out and seek those opportunities. As a result of my podcast and people sharing my free content, it being out in the world, I get people contacting me now asking me to be on their stages, and we can then negotiate around fees. That's really powerful. So a podcast allows you, again, to have that revenue. It's not like you're getting paid for the content, for producing the content like you would with sponsorship, but it's opening doors to paid opportunities. And I want to walk you through just a couple of scenarios that happened for me. I'm recording this on a Monday morning, so last week. Last week, I had a lady who had binge listened to 22 of my episodes after hearing me on somebody else's show. She really felt that she resonated with what I was saying, and so she hopped over to Entrepreneurs Get Visible. As a result of listening to all of those, she then sent me a message on LinkedIn. We hadn't been connected before, to say, I feel like I really want to connect with you. We've got quite a lot of similarities. And when we got on the call, it transpired that actually she really needed to get to grips with this visibility piece to build the business she wanted. So she then signed up for my high-ticket 3-month program, working with me one-to-one. So that's just one way that one person has contacted me through my podcast. The second thing, this was also last week. I had somebody who had watched a video that I did on LinkedIn about podcasting. So she followed the link in that video, which took her directly to my podcast. She consumed 5 episodes, which were about personal branding, and realised that actually she'd had a big fat message inside her for a long time. So she signed up to speak to me. We had a 10-minute conversation, and she signed up to be one of the first customers for my new podcast launch package. So she knew she wanted to take action. Now, the reason she knew that she wanted to take action was because she had already consumed 5 of my episodes. And by the time she'd done that, she'd been listening to me for about 2.5 hours. That's powerful stuff. The other thing that I do, my trickle-down revenue, is that I have various hypnosis and guided visualization tracks. From time to time, you'll hear them mentioned on this show. However, I haven't mentioned them on the show for about 2 months. But I sold last week 12 of those tracks to different people. So again, this is trickle-down revenue from old content. This is not new content. This is not me having to go out and create yet another Facebook post that disappears within 24 hours. This is content that lasts. The average length of value in a podcast episode is between 5 and 7 years at the moment. So then, another thing that happened to me was just last week, somebody reached out to me to say they had just finished listening to my Audible book, my audiobook Get Visible, because they had found me on my podcast, they'd heard about my book, they'd gone straight to Audible and then consumed the whole thing. So yes, that might not be a massive amount of income, but because I self-publish and I narrated my own book, I get most of the money and the rest goes to Amazon. And that, because she's now bought into me, because she has paid me through Amazon, who then pay me, she's now a customer of mine. She's now able to recommend me to other people. It's clearly touched her, the fact that she's got in touch with me to tell me about it. So she's going to spread the word. There's going to be other people who read my book or listen to my show as a result of that one person listening to my podcast. Other things that happen are that I get connections out of the blue to go and be a guest speaker in someone else's Facebook group or in their community or whatever it is. Now, often, because I will put a very specific lead magnet into that will be about getting people onto my podcast, then lots of people then come over to my podcast and my listenership increases. The more my listenership increases, the more people are going to come into my email list and into my funnel. Now, the interesting thing is, as you've probably heard and seen by now, I've recently been doing, and I'm right on day 4 at the moment, my Launch Your Podcast Challenge, which is this only the second time that I've actually run this particular challenge. And I did a bit of a test. I put 2 different links, a different link for my social media to the link that I put into my podcast show notes. Because I wanted to see, well, how many people are joining my content, joining my programs, joining my challenge as a result of these different platforms, because they work in different ways. And 25% of people came from my podcast link directly. Now, at the moment, I have nearly 700 people taking part in the challenge, and probably by the time you listen to this episode, there'll be nearly 800. A large portion of those have come through my podcast. If I hadn't got that podcast, there would be 25% less people that I could warm, nurture and engage and sell to. But the point is, it's not always about who buys from you specifically. It's about who knows about you. It's about who they can recommend you to. It's about them remembering that you are the person who knows about that thing that they need a problem with in 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2 years from now, because you are seen and you are visible. And that is the power of the trickle-down effect of podcasts. One of my members recently launched a podcast from the podcast membership, and it was actually her second podcast. But through the content that I shared with her, she put lots of other things into play. Within 4 episodes, which were out within 2 days of launching the podcast, she managed to monetize her show because someone contacted her to say that they wanted coaching from her. Now, at the time, she hadn't even put a coaching package together, but she, through some of my help, put together a high-ticket program that then sold within 2 days of launching a podcast. Now, it doesn't always happen that quickly because you've got to get your audience right, but that is the potential that you can have. I also have people that I've supported to have massive sponsorship deals, people who have got affiliation partnerships. I know that I get revenue almost every single week. Not every single week, it depends what I've talked about and which episodes people are listening to. But I have affiliation links in my podcast that bring me in money. That's the trickle-down effect. And if you have enough people listening and you have enough quality products that you are recommending and talking about, well, why not do that in your show? So I hope that this has given you some pause for thought about the trickle-down effect of podcasts. So yes, you could monetize through sponsorship and affiliations, but chiefly I would say you want to be promoting your own products and services. You want to be using it to make great connections. You want to be using it to drive people to your email list because that is what gives you a business. And many people say to me, well, I want a podcast because I want to help people. And I'm not really interested in the money. Well, I'm going to say, hello, are you nuts? The more money you have, the more people you can reach. So you want to learn the mechanisms behind it. It's important because that way you can get out there and change the world. And that to me is what podcasting is all about. Waking up one person to their potential, one listener at a time. So if you want to find out about the podcast membership before we close the doors and increase the price on Monday, the 1st of June at 9 p.m, then you need to go to www.thepodcastmembership.com/join. The link is in the show notes. That's it from me. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Entrepreneurs Get Visible. To get your free checklist on how to raise your profile and to find out about our community, go to annaparkernaples.co.uk/get visible.